Welcome to The Disruption Is Now. Join us on this enlightening journey as we explore how AI is impacting our jobs, careers, lives, and the human experience. Each episode, host Greg Matusky will converse with visionaries and innovators at the forefront of AI, diving into its challenges, opportunities, and impact. So buckle up as we venture into the heart of disruption, and together, let's unfold the future.
Well, welcome to another episode of Disruption Is Now. Of course, I'm the host, Greg Matusky. I'm also CEO of Gregory FCA, but we come here once a week in our podcast to talk about artificial intelligence, AI, and how it's impacting our businesses, our economy, our societies, our culture. And it's just a joy for me because I think we're at the year point of doing a podcast once a week. And every week I get to sit down with somebody from a different vertical or a different place in the AI spectrum and really learn from some of the brightest minds out there. And I get that lesson for free because I just host the podcast and I ask questions that interest me. And today I'm excited because we have the founder and CEO, Devon Kinkead of Micronotes AI. And he's going to talk a little bit about some of the challenges he sees in bringing machine learning and AI to the banking industry. I think he has a unique view because he brings an air of realism to it and skepticism, but also knows well the opportunities. Devon, did I sum that up right, or am I totally off mark?
No, Greg, I think you summed it up correctly. We've been building machine learning systems for banks and credit unions for 6 or 7 years, and yeah, we've learned a lot in about machine learning's capabilities. We've also learned where you don't want to use machine learning to solve problems that can be solved with closed form solutions or other simpler techniques because machine learning is a tool, and you use tools where they allow you to do what you're trying to do. What you don't want to do is walk around with a hammer and think everything is a nail.
And I think that's a risk. That's a risk in developing AI solutions because it's so glamorous. There's so much hype around AI that every company wants to be an AI company because valuations are better and because it's an easier sell and because it gets attention. But reality in back of these things, innovation can be seen in simplifying things. I mean, even Apple's announcement with their device specific AI, right? It's going to do simple things on the device to save energy and compute, right? And then it's going to send more complicated or more sophisticated things out to OpenAI, evidently. I guess that's their plan. But I think everyone is at a point where they're looking for those types of simplicity. Tell me about the simplicity of what you're doing with Micronotes and where it's helping banking connect with their customers, which I will go into. I'll tell you my horror stories on that issue after this, but tell me about the simplicity of this idea.
Yeah, well, so we got into the business in about 2018 of trying to help financial institutions not disintermediate themselves from their own customers. So you're old enough to remember when we used to go into banks, their bank branches. We hire a lot of interns from MIT, and we try to explain what a bank branch is to MIT students, and they kind of give you a blank stare. Why would I go into a branch? I don't get it. What's the purpose? And so, anyway, in the old days, we used to go into bank branches, and we used to actually talk to bankers, and bankers used to ask us about our lives and stuff. Anyway, as the digital and mobile banking revolution permeated the banking space, it was essentially disintermediating bankers from their customers. They didn't see them anymore, so they didn't know anything about them. They didn't know anything about their lives. So we built an app that essentially interviewed customers on mobile banking. And asked them questions about their lives and tried to help them out. And it turned out it worked very well. And there were certain cases where, in all cases, we were consuming the bank's data on customers. But there were certain use cases where we actually needed to employ machine learning. So, for example, if we're doing a recommendation for a product or a service from the bank, it's like Netflix for retail banking. It's like here's a recommendation. Well, what's that recommendation based on? Well, it's based on a machine learning model that sits on top of a time series data set that has been, has understandable performance characteristics, and it's a pretty good recommendation.
And it's interesting to me because we have a lot of banking clients, and this mediation has attendant effects that you would never see. I'll give you an example. So when the mobile revolution came about with community banking, it puts some distance between the bank and the customer, right? And so the bank relies on digital marketing to market its service, or the credit union. And they market to certain demographics, right? Makes sense. That's the way we all do it. Well, some of those demographics could eliminate disadvantaged communities, okay? So the DOJ sees this is going on. This is happening all over. And it used to be the DOJ would look into these issues through complaints. A consumer would complain that, hey, I didn't get the loan and I have all the qualifications. Or an employee whistleblower would complain about what was going on. But all of a sudden, the DOJ starts looking at it based on zip codes and demographics. And because the bank or the lending institution had no ill will, right, but was less connected to the customer, as you're talking about, the client, they're marketing to a couple different demographics. And lo and behold, to the disadvantage of certain zip codes that are out there. And now they're looking at penalties of $20, $50 million because the DOJ has hired evidently 1,000 attorneys to look into what would traditionally had been called redlining. But this isn't redlining because you're not taking out a map and redlining it. Rather, you're so disconnected to the customer, right, that you may be marketing just to one or two pockets, which eliminates good people who need access to loans to buy cars and buy homes and to get on with their lives. So this isn't just an issue of marketing. This is an issue of how banking has been so commoditized that the human factor has been dropped from it. So tell me how this would work.
Yeah. So, but before I do that, though, Greg, I want to. I think you nailed a very important aspect of AI as it relates to banking. So banking is a highly regulated industry. I mean, and your example was spot on. I mean, the challenge with using that we always have to think about for our customers, the challenge of employing probabilistic tools like machine learning is you always have to consider the potential regulatory impact. You described redlining. That's a great, that is exactly the challenge that we have in serving the financial services industry. Is our models have got to pass regulatory requirements, and they can't be black boxes. And this is a real challenge, and something that we have this additional constraint in financial services that a lot of other industries just don't have. But everything we do has to be viewed through the regulatory lens. So I just wanted to say that your example reads right on top of our daily life.
That really ties into how you look at this. You have a realm, you have a lens of reality that goes along with AI, which separates out the hype. And I will say the laziness, right? Because it is easy to use AI to create messages. It's easy to use AI to think through a marketing plan, right?
Yeah.
But with that comes a degree of laziness that you just expect the machine to be right because it's so affirmative, right? In how it projects that to you. And if the grammar's right, the wording's right, you're right. If it's got 10 ideas that have been used before, but it really does open you up to potential oversights because you become so comfortable with it that you don't realize that it's not going to meet regulatory scrutiny.
Yeah, and for example, our company we're actually partly owned by Experian. You've probably heard of Experian, and we process 230 million consumer records a week to do our work, and needless to say, that is all credit data, and it is highly regulated. And so, anytime you even begin to think about using probabilistic models, and then ultimately making firm offers of credit to consumers, you have the FCRA looking over your shoulder, and you have to be very, very careful. So, the regulatory aspect is really key. Historically, I would say, Craig, that the real place where AI has made its mark historically in financial services, of course, is in fraud and fraud detection. Why? Because there isn't a very good way to do fraud detection without machine learning, and that's a good example because, again, you don't want to use machine learning if you don't have to. It's complex. Some of the models are some of the models that we use are there are 20 people in the world who can actually explain how they work. That's not ideal. So you only use those when you absolutely have to. Fraud is a great case of that, where you can train a model to spot fraud and it'll learn because you can provide it with plenty of actual fraud cases, which are part of the learning process. So that's a great example. But and there are other examples that, where we use machine learning because we have to. For example, attrition risk. You can't do attrition risk without machine learning, but you can do other things without machine learning that are statistically driven and important use cases. For example, our machines look and, they'll look at someone's average balance in their checking account, and if it's $5,000 and this morning it's $550,000, we'll automatically start a conversation with that customer to see if we can help them invest that windfall, which could have been from a rich aunt, or it could have been from the sale of a home, or heaven knows what else. But that's a statistical problem, not a machine learning problem, and we do not use machine learning to apply to that use case. So
that's interesting. That's one of some of the points of pain I've had over the years with banks. I'll give you some very specific examples.
Yeah.
When the pandemic hit, right, and there was some question about the viability of the financial system and what this would do to it, right? You look at where you have your cash accounts, and you have a lot of money in one bank because you're running it all day long. You got payroll to fill, and we have 125 people. That's a couple $1 million just you got to have on hand to meet payroll and rent and all the things that we do as business people. Well, FDIC insurance is $250, and you're thinking, all right, I better spread it around. So I go to my bank, I withdraw it down to $250 for one bank, my primary bank, and I go open other accounts at other banks. Not once did I get any notification from the bank I withdrew it from or the banks that I put it into as to, hey, what's the problem here, Greg? What, all of a sudden you walk off the street and put this money in. Oh, did you know that if you had more signers on the account, you could actually multiply the FDIC? No one sat down and told me about that. No one. No one contacted me to find out what the real purpose, what I was really doing, right?
And that's the sad truth of the state of affairs, Greg, and why solutions like ours are helpful, because most banks, you put $500,000 deposit in your checking account, assuming it'll stay there for a couple of days until you find where you want it to end up, and no one ever contacts you. And consequently, it turns out that more than half of those deposits disappear in 60 days if you don't do anything about it.
Say that again.
So if what we call these things exceptional deposits, which are statistically exceptional events. So the example I gave earlier, you have an average $5,000 checking balance, and this morning you have $500,000 in your checking account. We call that a statistical exception. And so if you don't do anything about that, in 60 days, half of that will leave the bank. Half of those deposits will just disappear. Why? Because someone else is on the ball and you're not, with your own customer. And they ended up getting the wealth business, the CD business, whatever business, the mortgage business, because they're in between buying homes or whatever it is. But yeah, it's really tragic. But again, that's a statistical use case. That's not a machine learning use case. And it's much better handled with simple statistics than it is with machine learning models, which require, big fancy data sets and, the elimination of covariant attributes and attribute selection algorithms and all this stuff that, you actually have to get right in the back end before you can report a high performance model that, and we have very high performance models for certain things, but only where we need to. And attrition risk is a good example. We can literally give clients a list of 100 people and say, 86 of these will be gone in the next 90 days. And sure enough, if you show up on day 91, 86 of them will be gone.
Now, beforehand, we were talking a bit about some of the challenges you're facing, and you were talking about the banking industry as a whole and how they're in an echo chamber of their own misgivings about machine learning and AI, and some of the fallacies you hear played back to you. In my business, it's the same way. I mean, if I had to address one more time hallucinations in generative, right?
Yeah.
Whereas we're content creators, Devon, and that's what we do. We hallucinate, right? We try to do it in a way that's called creativity.
Creativity, right?
Yeah. So
what you call creativity, someone else calls a hallucination.
That's right. Tell me a little bit about that. What do you hear? So where are we on that educational spectrum?
We're not very far. So I actually I give talks on the basics of AI to bankers on a fairly routine basis. And I mean, the first thing is there's a whole language system around machine learning that people don't understand. They don't understand unless they've had some training. There's basic stuff that they don't understand. For example, one of the examples I give is to large groups of bankers sitting in chairs attentively listening, is so if you were going to try to predict the volume of water coming out of a faucet, what kind of data would you be looking for in order to make that prediction? Would you be looking for the direction, east or west, that the faucet is pointing? Would you be looking at information about the position of the valve? And what I'm trying to get across, and we have a lot of fun with this, but the point is that what I'm trying to get across is machine learning doesn't mean anything if you don't have information that is useful to making the prediction. So what I'm trying to get across to these folks is that if you're sitting in a meeting, and someone is telling you about how great some prediction is or some predictive model is, you are obligated to start asking questions about, well, what is the information that was used to make this prediction? And if it doesn't make sense, then it doesn't make sense. You're not going to make a good prediction about the amount of water coming out of a faucet by whether the faucet is facing east or west. That's not a good piece of information to use. So the first thing is just getting the basic understanding of what the hell these models actually do, and what a prediction really is, and what are the necessary requirements to make a reasonably reliable prediction about something. So we start there, and then we go through, we go through basic language. What is precision? What is recall? What's an F-score? What happens if two vendors come to you and one model says to make this decision, and another model says to make the exact opposite decision. What are you supposed to do? Well, what do? Well, you look at the performance of the models. Well, how do I do that? Well, you look at precision, recall, and F-score. Let me tell you what those things mean. And so there's this, there's a fundamental lack of understanding of what a prediction is and how to make it. And there's also a misunderstanding. There's just a lack of language around AI and machine learning. And so consequently, it's very difficult for our customers to sort through all this stuff. I mean, they get AI all day long, but they don't know how to evaluate it. But the best questions I hear are the questions like, well, Devon, I literally got two different results from two different vendors, and they say to do the exact opposite things. What do I do? That's a good question. That's a really good question. And so that sort of leads you into this conversation about, well, how do you measure the performance of a model, and how do you ask questions about how this model was built? So,
well, that's interesting. It echoes kind of, again, I'm not a machine learning guy. I'm not a technical guy, but I am a language human being. And that's where I, struck my career on, placed my career on. And I was sharing with you, we started this journey 4 years ago before ChatGPT, when we thought we could almost automate the writing process. And it started exactly where you said. It was asking questions, right? We had 70 different kinds of content. Now, what would you have to know to make this piece of content appropriate for this purpose, right? We asked question after question. That's why when ChatGPT came along, we were already so far ahead because we didn't know it at that time. But we were conditioning ourselves to think like prompts, right? And we overcame a lot of silly problems. I'll give you a silly problem in my world. One is if you ask ChatGPT to write a news release, it always creates a quote from the CEO that says something like, "We're excited that XYZ has joined the firm." I mean, I would just love to see a release someday that said, "We're not so excited about this, but it was the best guy we could find, the best girl we could find. This is, it's just another person, but hey, at least we filled the position, right?" No one says that. So we really learned that you had to ask the machine. First of all, it had to have the vision of the company, and it had to have maybe the product pipeline and how this move fit in to the vision of the company. And all of a sudden, the quotes came alive. This new position fills our vision for expanding our blah, 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 blah. And all of a sudden, it could think like we did. But it all came from asking these questions. And I'll give you a really great case study that I often give to classes that I give on generative AI about the hallucination effect, right? Now, go back with me a year, SVB bank collapse, okay? And at that point, the popular models were not yet connected to the internet in real time. So if you were to ask ChatGPT about about the collapse, you'd say, "Tell me about Silicon Valley Bank." It would basically give you a Wikipedia definition, it deals a lot with innovators and entrepreneurs, and it's tied to the VC community. And it gave you a good overview, right? But it didn't talk about the collapse because it didn't know about it because it couldn't see. And you say, "Well, tell me about the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank." And it said, Silicon Valley Bank collapsed because of the many bad debts it had in its portfolio and its failure to service those debts. But it was wrong, right? If it collapsed because it didn't hedge its bond, as you know, its bond portfolio. But that's a great example. It was so affirmative, right? And how it said it, because every training it ever had said most banks fail because of bad debts. Most banks fail because of bad debts. That when you ask the machine without it realizing it, without its human checkpoint, right? The human who could be there to inform it, it relied on its training data, and it gave you a result that was predictive, right? But wrong. And it's just an interesting world of where I've come from on the generative AI side of it. But we're seeing a lot of interesting companies in the financial services sector. Last week we had, I guess it was another Vestigo company on, which is doing insurance risk mitigation. It's based in Vietnam. That was an interesting conversation. Just, the Vietnamese business community and the talent community. We had wealth managers on. They're talking about all kinds of AI tools to help wealth management. And it seems as if there's a big dichotomy between banking and wealth management. And wealth management, there's a whole sector of individuals who just want to be with clients, right? They just want a relationship. So they're more open to AI tools, right? Because it relieves them of all the administrative and back end. A really cool company called Jump, which actually it's a note taking from a meeting. Well, we got a lot of AI note taking, but it then cascades into a whole workflow, right? It takes everything out of that and it creates your whole workflow, which I had not really seen. I wished I had that alternative for the business I'm in, where I could interview a potential client or a client, and then it would give me, every step of the way.
Your workflow, tell you what to do for the next 3 weeks.
Right. So in those places, I think the acceptance is much more immediate, because these individuals aren't coming from the highly, it's a regulated industry, but not like what we're talking about with regard to, assuring the equal and equitable access to credit. I mean, that's a whole different ballgame.
Fair lending laws. Yeah.
But anyway, Devon, and very interesting conversation. You are a very charismatic and interesting entrepreneur that's really moving this forward. Where do you see your company going in the next few months, years? What's the game plan?
Well, we're focused on helping, the near term, the 8,000 or so banks and credit unions in the United States just do a better job with their customers. I mean, it's as you said earlier, it's really inexcusable for them, not to, you drop $250,000 into their bank and no one ever picks up the phone. Nobody ever reaches out to you. That kind of stuff is it's rampant and it's inexcusable. There's just too many good tools for doing things like that. The other thing is because we're processing so much credit data now, we know where every dollar of mispriced debt is in the United States, and that's of course hundreds of billions of dollars. And so we're automating systems that essentially alert bank and credit union customers that they have materially mispriced debt, and they should refinance it. And here's how, and here's how much you can save by doing it. So there's this. That's essentially correcting for the inefficiencies in the lending market, and those are some of the really big opportunities.
And how far off is that? The debt.
We're doing it now. We've got about 12, 15 clients now who are now actively doing that through our automation systems. And so
that is machine learning, that one?
That one actually is not. We have kept ML out of that one, at least for the moment. There will come a time though when we will train models to only focus on folks we think are actually going to respond based on historically people who have responded to those refinancing offers. But the idea that you can, it's really cool actually, because you can go out and you can the system will automatically, send out FCRA compliant firm offers of credit to people who can save real money. I mean, we're talking, $30,000 over 5 years by just refinancing debt. Mostly these folks are not financial people. They're healthcare professionals, they're teachers, they're whatever, but this is not something they think about that often. But if you do the computations and you display it in a simple to understand method, and it's all you have to do is, contact your bank to lower your borrowing costs. That's awesome, because now you're actually improving the efficiency of the U.S. lending markets.
And I think Devon, that's again, that's from the banking side that they'll notify customers, or
Yep.
the way
Now,
you
our
said it, almost
systems-
I'm thinking, are you now going to the consumer market to notify them, or how's it working?
Yeah, so it's working really well, and in fact, it's helping our clients not only lower the borrowing costs of their customers by refinancing debt held elsewhere, but we're also using it to do new customer acquisition, new member acquisition in areas in which they currently operate. So our systems will auto sort of geo-target areas where the bank or the credit union has a real physical presence, and so you're a PR guy, you know that it matters that you're in contact with the brand every day. So these people, these areas in which they're operating have billboards for the bank all over the place, but billboards are about the bank, not about the consumer.
Right.
What we're doing is connecting the concept of the bank to actual savings for the consumer, and so that's exciting because we're helping people lower their borrowing costs. And it turns out, interestingly, that most of the people that take advantage of that are people in the mid-tier. They're not the people who will actually save the most amount of money. It's the folks who will actually save a modest amount of money. Because it matters to them. $50 a month matters.
Yeah,
it doesn't
sure
matter
does.
to a guy making $1 million a month. It matters to someone making $100,000.
Yeah, that's the whole basis of auto loans, right? People buy them according to what the monthly payment's going to be instead of what the total cost of it's going to be to you. So it does matter to people. I think you're doing good work on that front for sure. I got one last question. Now, we talked a lot about automating the relationship, right? And finding meaningful ways to extend your product offering and brand to the consumer. Do you use any tools to do that with your client base?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So we actually, when you were talking earlier, Greg, about your early experiences with generative AI, we are using Gen AI to do a bunch of stuff. In fact, one of the fun things we've been doing recently is we interview our clients periodically to make sure we're doing a good job. And when we convert those interviews into blog posts, or thank you notes or whatever, one of the things we do is we actually do we do a Gen AI or an AI generated image of the client, and that's a tricky business, right? You want to do a good job, right? You don't want to make your client look physically bad,
right?
In a blog post or an article or something you're doing. And so anyway, the good news is that we've gotten a lot of we've created, our clients look absolutely fantastic in our articles, and they like it, which is more important than anything. So anyway, I just thought that was a funny angle on just trying to make sure that if you're going to do a spotlight image of a client, you better do a good job. And the way you know that you did a good job is they like it.
Well, I'll throw out one last idea and then I'll shut up. I've been working on an AI generated crisis communications. Can we call them apps? Do we call them apps? Not? But and I'm thinking of specifically marketing it for DOJ. So if you have some way of determining whether a company could statistically be out of the bounds of compliance, I'm going to have the back end to do all of the manual. Who are your stakeholders you need to speak with? Here are the messages to your employees. Here's the script for your branch employees. So put that in the back of your mind. Maybe there's a partnership opportunity there in some way. But Devon, it's been a great talk. I really appreciate your time. I'll let you get back to revolutionizing the way banks interface with their customers in this digital age. And I want to thank you for being with us.
Thanks, Greg. It was fun. Cheers.
This podcast is a production of Gregory FCA. If you enjoyed our discussion today and want to continue exploring the transformative power of AI, please check out more episodes and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you.